With Gwynne. This is my off the cuff and unrehearsed thoughts about all things business. This week, will globalization negatively affect tourism? I've been wondering. When I was a kid, I went to America quite a lot of times, and there was loads of little treats and snacks and local foods that I could not get back in the UK. And so I fell in love with them in America. It was one of my favorite things to go back and sort of say, oh, I can have Froot Loops, which weren't available, and I can have Oreos that weren't available. And then slowly over time, all of these American brands have infiltrated their way over to the UK, where I saw that they were advertising Reese's Pieces recently. Oreos did not come to the UK until 2008, and now they can be found in pretty much every grocery shopping place. And so, what used to be something that was very special to me and made me think about good times on vacation can be found anywhere. It stopped being special. If you like bubble tea, you probably know that it's originally from Taiwan and has become a global sensation. Everybody in the world likes bubble tea at the moment. But if you're from Taiwan, does that mean that bubble tea is no longer special to you? Does it no longer remind you of home? Certain things are so popular that they become famous and available everywhere. I was often thinking about what's the British equivalent, and I've asked a number of people this, and they all say the same thing. It's full English breakfast, is what we have exported to the world. Everybody can have a full English breakfast, and I think that's good. If that's what we're going to be known for, yes, that's what I want to be able to have everywhere. What a great thing to have when you're on vacation. But it made me think, well, if it's available everywhere, at a certain point, it becomes less special. Recently, there's been a lot of gacha, that's famous in Japan and Asia, and that's become popular in England and popping up everywhere. Although we kind of had a form of it, but again, it made me think, well, that was something that used to be special to me on vacation, and I knew I could never get that in the UK, and suddenly I can get it in the UK. And yes, it's more expensive. There's an import charge on it, but I can get that if I want to. Now, I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that I would go to America for Oreos or for Fruit Loops, or I would go to Asia for bubble tea, but certainly it's a nice extra thing that you can enjoy while you're there. And it adds to the experience of going abroad. And so, at a point where although the good stuff has been exported, will that negatively impact tourism? So, despite COVID-19 and sort of global protectionism, closing of borders, people are worried about tourism in general. It has rebounded pretty strongly since the pandemic. 88% of pre pandemic levels were in place by 2023. Global tourism contributed $9.5 trillion to global GDP in 2023. And in fact, in some places now, there's sort of an anti tourism phase going on, places like Venice, Barcelona, Bali, because unsustainable tourist inflows have happened. And UNESCO is actually warning that Venice may be added to endangered heritage list in 2023. Tourism accounts for 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And that's according to the Nature Climate Change 2018. And global air travel is projected to double by 2040. And of course, this has been enhanced by cheap air flights to more exotic destinations. Certainly, when I was a kid, I never knew anybody who went to Asia, and now quite a lot of people I know have gone to Asia. It's not so unusual to meet somebody who's been to Asia or more far-flung destinations. You go there, and now they have an increasing amount of English available in the same way that we have an increasing amount of Chinese available or Mandarin available in most of our tourist places. Bali seems to be so popular basically because of social media. And I'm sure we've all had friends who've been to Thailand and thought and come back and said, I don't know why I'm not living there. It's so cheap to live. I can have a nicer place. And we have this weird mass migration of people from Western countries are going to cheap Asian countries, and those people are trying to get here. And interestingly, that mix only makes sense in a world where you can live remotely, and you would imagine at some point that everywhere kind of becomes the same, and the cost of living isn't that much cheaper in places like Thailand versus the UK because there's such an influx of Western people there that prices will naturally go up. We've also seen brands trying to globalize themselves as much as possible. McDonald's is in over 100 countries. Starbucks was famously had a location in the Forbidden City, which was later removed due to backlash. And mall skyscrapers and Western fashion brands are appearing in everywhere from Nairobi to New Delhi. George Ritzer in The McDonaldization of Society said, "What is familiar in one place becomes familiar in all." Quite a good book, that. So he does sort of a sociological examination of how the principles of fast food restaurants, efficiency, calculability, predictability, and control have sort of become dominant, not just in American culture, but sort of most of the world. It's a really interesting read, and sort of it applies to most businesses these days. I think efficiency. So everybody's looking to streamline operations to achieve those goals more quickly. Calculability, focusing on quantity over quality in most cases. So how much and how fast. Predictability is being optimized, so standardized experience across time and place over unpredictability or uniqueness is often deprioritized, and sort of control use of technology and non-human systems to regulate behaviors. And he talks about the negative and positive impacts of that. It's really, really good book. I recommend it. Obviously, globalization isn't one way, so cultures often adapt and mix and localize what is imported. K-pop is sort of the Korean reinterpretation of Western pop. And even McDonald's, they're dramatically different depending where you go. Muk spaghetti you get in the Philippines, paneer burgers in India, and local artists and artisan will use global tools like Instagram or Etsy to showcase the unique heritage. Kwame Anthony Appiah, a philosopher, said in his book Worldwide Tax that the globalization of culture is not the same as homogenization. And I think that's important to bear in mind, that there's always a local mix on even the biggest fast food chain. So, do I think that globalization will ultimately negatively impact tourism? Most of the trends would tell you otherwise. Most of you would say that now, with post pandemic and people feel more confident traveling, that they are wanting to do more. I'm seeing a lot more people sort of do those bucket list items that they didn't necessarily before. I think there does come a point where the impact on the environment becomes more and more noticeable. I think technology is not catching up fast enough. I think a lot of these annoying people who want to save the world are the same people who go for a weekend trip to Italy, and they fly there and all of this kind of stuff that's not necessarily in line with them. I do think that you can potentially, in a multicultural society, you can have sort of mini experiences that are quite authentic if you do those with the local period people from those places. So I think Italy is an interesting chain. It imports all of the brands from Italy. You can go to a nice restaurant. It's very, very authentic to those brands and the way that they prepare the food and all that kind of thing. And I suspect we'll see more of that. I mean, certainly I live in London and we have a lot of like, hey, here's the great Thai places that are very close to there, and here's the great Korean places. And so you get those inputs, and I expect to see more and more of that spread out. When I was a kid, sushi was this rare, expensive place, and there was maybe one sushi place in all of the city, and I never had that until I was a teenager, and it got imported to Tesco, and then it opened up to me to sushi, and now I know what sushi is, and I know good sushi and bad sushi and the different kinds. And certainly with Chinese food, I think for most of England, we only had sweet and sour and black bean. That was the two options that we had, and now I know like Szechuan food versus other regions of China. So I think globalization can be a good thing because it can open you up and extend your knowledge, and then you go from category to understanding what you like and all those things, and maybe it makes people more interested in those things. I know a lot of people who travel to Japan or whatever say that they're first interested in Japanese culture because of anime and manga and all of those kind of things, and so one can directly lead to the other in opening up a category. But I also think that at a time where you can get those experiences more local to you, it becomes more of a consideration whether you want to pay increasing amounts of money to travel abroad and travel 14 hours to then see the real thing, when you can get an approximation of that locally. And that has pros and cons both to that and a stage where tourism may be becoming more of a problem than a profit margin or an income source to people. And so I think there's no one straightforward answer. I think that both of those things can happen at the same time, and depending on the level that they happen, they can be good. If you can enjoy Venice in Las Vegas and it's more authentic than it is in Las Vegas, I guess, and you don't then need to travel to real Venice and it causes problems, that can be a good thing. If you can go to the fake London that's in China and then you don't have to travel here and it hurts the environment, that can be a good thing. But it's all about building those immersive experiences that are true to the spirit of those places and not just a cultural appropriation gone wrong and a generalization of them. So those are my thoughts on whether globalization will affect tourism. I guess I don't have a straightforward conclusion. I guess it will affect it, but it can affect it in a myriad of ways. Thanks very much for watching. Put something in the comments about if you've ever traveled abroad based on an experience that you've experienced locally.